Senior observer Caxley stood before the massive display screen aboard the Galactic Survey Corps vessel's Stellar Seeker, their iridescent scales shifting from a peaceful blue to an alarmed purple as they processed the data streaming across the holographic interface. Behind them, the ship's crew worked in stunned silence, their own bioluminescent patterns pulsing with shared disbelief. "Run the atmospheric analysis again," Caxley ordered, their secondary breathing gills fluttering with agitation. "These readings cannot be correct." The ship's AI responded with its usual efficiency, but the numbers remained unchanged. The planet rotating beneath them, designated Sol 3 by their charts, but called Earth by its inhabitants, defied everything they knew about habitable worlds. Atmospheric pressure at sea level, 101.325 kilopascals, the AI reported. Surface gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. Temperature variations, ranging from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius. Confirmed presence of multiple active tectonic plates, resulting in frequent geological instability. First Science Officer Vector, a tall, willowy being from a low-gravity world, approached the display. Their support exoskeleton whirred softly with each careful step. Senior observer, the most remarkable finding isn't the planetary conditions. It's this. They gestured with a six-fingered hand, bringing up a new data stream. Caxley's scales shifted to pure white, the color of absolute shock. The screen showed cities, sprawling metropolitan areas spread across every continent, connected by vast networks of transportation infrastructure. Orbital satellites circled the planet in complex patterns, and primitive space stations hung in low orbit. "They're not just surviving," Vector continued, their voice trembling. "They're thriving. Look at these population centers. Some are built directly on fault lines. Others exist in regions that experience regular cyclonic storms. There's even a city in a desert where daytime temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius. Impossible," Caxley whispered, but the evidence was undeniable. "Show me their biological data." The screen shifted again, displaying the analysis of Earth's dominant species. The humans, as they called themselves, seemed almost deliberately designed to survive in conditions that would kill most sentient species in the galaxy. Dense musculature, reinforced skeletal structure, redundant organ systems, and an incredible ability to regulate their internal temperature. "They're persistence predators," Vector explained, bringing up footage their probes had captured. "They don't just survive in these conditions, they actively seek out challenges. Look at this." The screen showed humans climbing sheer rock faces for recreation, diving into turbulent oceans, and running long distances in extreme temperatures. Each new image made Caxley's scales shift through various shades of disbelief. "This one is particularly interesting," Vector said, highlighting a specific recording. "They call it a marathon. Thousands of humans gathering to run 42.2 kilometers, often in challenging weather conditions, purely for personal achievement." Caxley's third heart began beating faster. In all their cycles as a senior observer, they had never encountered anything like this. Most species evolved in carefully balanced environments, their bodies adapted to specific, stable conditions. But humans seemed to treat adversity as a challenge to be overcome rather than a threat to be avoided. "There's more," Vector added, their voice dropping to a whisper. "Their technological development is accelerating at an unprecedented rate. They went from primitive atmospheric flight to rudimentary space travel in less than a century. Their information networks span the entire planet. They're on the verge of discovering faster than light travel." "How?" Caxley demanded. "How does a species not only survive but achieve this level of development on a world that should have killed them?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Junior observer Miriam, who had been quietly analyzing cultural data in the corner, spoke up. "They adapt, senior observer. When they encounter an obstacle, they don't avoid it. They find a way to overcome it. Their entire history is a chronicle of turning disadvantages into strengths." Caxley moved closer to the screen, watching as humans went about their daily lives, seemingly oblivious to the fact that they were doing the impossible. They built structures to withstand earthquakes, developed technologies to predict storms, and created environments where they could not only survive but flourish in conditions that would be lethal to most species. Update their classification, Caxley ordered, their scales settling into a deep green of determination. Earth is now designated as a Class 12 death world, and its inhabitants, they paused, choosing their words carefully, are to be considered an apex species. The classification sent a ripple of nervous color changes through the crew. Class 12 was the highest possible designation for a habitable world, reserved for planets so hostile that the very fact they supported life at all was considered remarkable. No sentient species had ever been discovered on such a world, until now. Contact the Council, Caxley commanded. Tell them we found something unprecedented. A species that doesn't just survive in conditions we considered impossible, they've mastered them. And they're about to join the galactic community. As the message was transmitted, Caxley continued to watch the humans on the screen. A group of them were responding to what their sensors identified as a natural disaster, a massive forest fire. Instead of fleeing, they were moving toward the danger, working together to save others and contain the threat. Remarkable, Caxley murmured. They don't just live on a death world. They've made it their strength. The implications were both thrilling and terrifying. Humanity was about to step onto the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same. They weren't just another spacefaring species. They were Deathworlders, beings who treated survival in extreme conditions as their baseline for normal existence. As the Stellar Seeker maintained its orbit around Earth, Caxley made one final entry in their observation log. We came expecting to find primitives struggling to survive on a hostile world. Instead, we found something far more significant, a species that has turned adversity into advantage and challenge into opportunity. The galaxy isn't ready for humans, but perhaps that's exactly why we need them. Ambassador Zinra's environmental suit whirred softly as it compensated for Earth's crushing gravity. The diplomatic team had chosen a location in what humans called Switzerland for first contact, hoping the relatively stable geological region would help calm their nerves. It hadn't worked. Even through the suit's protective layers, Zinra could feel the weight of this world pressing down on them. The human delegation is approaching, announced Security Chief Ven Lai, their crystalline form refracting sunlight in patterns that indicated anxiety. Even with their species' naturally armored body, they found Earth's conditions daunting. The human vehicles appeared on the horizon, moving with what seemed to the aliens like reckless speed. 5 ground transport vehicles and 2 aerial craft. Zinra had studied the briefing materials extensively, but nothing had prepared them for seeing humans move so confidently in their natural environment. The vehicles stopped, and the humans emerged. No environmental suits, no gravity compensators, not even basic atmospheric filters. They simply stepped out into conditions that would kill most galactic species within minutes, wearing what appeared to be decorative fabric coverings they called clothes. "Welcome to Earth," said the lead human, a tall female who had introduced herself in previous communications as Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's chief diplomatic officer. "I hope the atmospheric conditions aren't too uncomfortable for you." Zinra's translator processed the words, noting the genuine concern in her voice. "We are managing, thank you," they responded, marveling at how the humans stood so casually in the crushing gravity. "Our suits are designed to." The ground trembled. The alien delegation immediately activated their emergency protocols, their suits stiffening into protective shells. The humans, however, barely seemed to notice. Dr. Chen glanced at a device on her wrist. "Small tremor," she said casually. "About 3.5 on the Richter scale. Nothing to worry about." Before Zinra could process this casual dismissal of planetary instability, their sensors detected something far more alarming. A massive storm system was approaching, one that their instruments indicated would produce electrical discharges powerful enough to disable their ship shields. Dr. Chen, Zinra began, their translator struggling to convey their urgency. Our sensors indicate. The thunderstorm. Chen nodded, looking at the darkening sky. Yes, it's moving in faster than predicted. We should move this inside. Please, follow me. The alien delegation watched in amazement as the humans calmly began relocating their equipment. No panic, no emergency procedures, just efficient, practiced movements. They had barely reached the building, a reinforced structure the humans called a conference center, when the storm hit. Lightning split the sky, thunder rattled the windows, and rain pounded against the roof with enough force to make the alien delegate's sensors scream warnings about micrometeorite impacts. Please, make yourselves comfortable, Chen said, gesturing to specially designed seats that had been constructed to accommodate their various physiologies. We can continue our discussions while we wait out the storm. You do this often? Asked Science Officer Vector, who had accompanied the diplomatic team from the Stellar Seeker. Continue normal activities during such extreme weather events. Chen smiled, a human expression that the aliens had learned indicated amusement or friendliness. Of course, we can't stop living every time it rains. Would anyone like refreshments? The casual offer of hospitality during what the aliens considered a natural disaster was interrupted by an urgent communication. One of the human aides rushed in, speaking rapidly to Dr. Chen. The universal translators picked up fragments. Mountain pass, avalanche, trapped climbers. Chen turned to the alien delegation, her expression now serious but still composed. I apologize, but we have an emergency situation that requires immediate attention. You're welcome to observe our response procedures, if you're interested. What followed was, to the alien observers, both terrifying and fascinating. The humans transformed their conference room into an emergency response center within minutes. Screens displayed real-time weather data, topographical maps, and rescue team positions. Humans moved with purpose, coordinating multiple teams and resources simultaneously. The climbers are trapped here, Chen explained, pointing to a location on the map. The avalanche has blocked the main rescue route, and the storm is making aerial evacuation impossible. We're implementing Plan C. Plan C? Zinray asked. Ground team approached through the secondary ridge, Chen replied, as if suggesting a stroll through a garden rather than a rescue mission in conditions that the alien sensors indicated were approaching lethal levels. The aliens watched in stunned silence as humans equipped themselves with what seemed like absurdly minimal protection and headed out into the storm. Their sensors tracked the rescue team's progress as they moved through conditions that should have been impossible to survive. Sub-zero temperatures, high winds, treacherous terrain, and near-zero visibility. How can they even function in these conditions? Security Chief Venley asked, their crystalline form vibrating with concern. We adapt, Chen said simply, her eyes fixed on the rescue team's progress. It's what humans do. When we encounter obstacles, we find ways to overcome them. We've been doing it since we first walked upright. The rescue operation lasted 6 hours. The alien delegation watched as the humans not only reached the trapped climbers but successfully evacuated them, all while operating in conditions that would have caused most species to shut down completely. When it was over, when the rescued climbers had been transported to medical facilities and the rescue teams had returned, Dr. Chen turned back to the diplomatic discussions as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Now, where were we in our discussion about cultural exchange programs? Zinra exchanged looks with their team, their various biological indicators showing shared amazement. They had come to Earth prepared to carefully manage contact with what they assumed would be a fragile species struggling to survive on a deadly world. Instead, they found themselves dealing with beings who treated conditions that would kill most species as minor inconveniences to be overcome. Dr. Chen, Zinra said carefully, I believe we need to completely revise our approach to these negotiations. We clearly have much to learn from humanity." Chen smiled again, and this time the aliens understood the expression perfectly. It was the smile of someone who knew they had just changed the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. "That's why we're here," she said, "to learn from each other. Though I have to admit, we're quite curious about what you consider challenging conditions." As if to emphasize her point, another rumble of thunder shook the building. None of the humans even looked up. The Jovian moon's surface gleamed like polished obsidian under the massive gas giant's light. Mining Station J-17 jutted from the icy crust like a metallic spider, its supports driven deep into the unstable surface. Inside the main control room, Station Chief Maya Rodriguez watched as human and alien crews coordinated their efforts on the massive holographic display. "Thermal readings are spiking in Section 7, reported Crix, their crystalline form shifting colors in the artificial light. As a member of the silicon-based Arcsid species, they were one of the few alien crew members who could operate without an environmental suit, though they still required gravity compensation. Maya nodded, studying the readings. The joint human-alien mining operation had been running for 3 months, extracting rare elements essential for FTL drive construction. It was meant to be a showcase of interspecies cooperation and a controlled environment for aliens to study human capabilities. Normal variants, Maya replied, taking a sip from her coffee. The ice shifts create heat pockets. We mapped them during the initial survey. Crix's crystalline structure flickered with what Maya had learned was their equivalent of amazement. You mapped geological instabilities. And still built here. Maya smiled. Best source of xenorium in the solar system. Besides, unstable just means we need better engineering, not that we need to give up. The conversation was interrupted by a violent tremor that shook the entire station. Warning lights flashed as multiple alerts screamed for attention. Maya was moving before the first alarm finished sounding. "Status report," she barked, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Major structural failure in mining shaft 3. Crix reported, their crystalline form vibrating with stress. The ice shelf shifted. We have, by the crystal matrix, we have 27 crew members trapped, both human and alien." Maya's mind raced through calculations. The trapped crew were 400 meters below the surface in a highly unstable area. Standard rescue protocols would take too long. The pocket they were trapped in was losing atmosphere and structural integrity. "Emergency teams to Shaft 3, she ordered. "Crix, give me a full structural analysis. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." The next few minutes were chaos as data poured in. The situation was worse than initially feared. The shaft was rapidly becoming unstable, and the alien environmental suits weren't designed for these conditions. They had less than 2 hours before total collapse. The alien members of the control team were already discussing evacuation protocols when Maya made her decision. "We're going in after them." "Impossible," declared Telvo, the Galactic Council's safety observer. Their environmental suit whirred as they turned to face Maya. "The conditions exceed safety parameters for all known rescue procedures. The temperature variations alone are within human tolerance ranges," Maya interrupted. "Especially with our thermal suits. The gravity's only 1.2 times Earth normal. We can handle that. The radiation from Jupiter will be blocked by our suits for the time we need." Maya was already pulling up the emergency equipment inventory. "We've trained for this. Now we execute." What followed was, to the alien observers, a masterclass in human crisis management. Maya coordinated 3 rescue teams, each using what the aliens considered impossibly primitive but effective methods to reach the trapped crew. Team 1. Deploy the thermal boring units, Maya ordered. Team 2. Prepare for structural reinforcement. Team 3. Medical support and evacuation coordination. Move. The aliens watched in stunned silence as humans donned what seemed like inadequate protection and moved into conditions that their sensors indicated were approaching lethal levels. The rescue teams worked with practiced efficiency, boring through the ice while simultaneously reinforcing the unstable tunnels. How are they still functioning? Telvos asked, their environmental suits' sensors struggling to process the conditions. The pressure differentials alone should be incapacitating. Humans evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill us. Maya explained, not looking up from the rescue coordination. We learned to treat hostile conditions as puzzles to be solved rather than barriers to stop us. Team 1, you're approaching the first pocket. Status: breaking through now, came the response. We've got 5 alien crew members here. Their suits are failing, but they're alive. Beginning evacuation. Over the next hour, the rescue teams work their way through the collapsed sections. They improvise solutions to problems that the alien safety protocols hadn't even considered possible to solve. When their equipment couldn't handle the conditions, they modified it on the spot. When standard procedures proved inadequate, they created new ones. Last team reporting, crackled the comm system. Final group located. But we've got a problem. The ice shelf is becoming critically unstable. Maya studied the sensor readings, her mind racing through options. The final group was in the most dangerous position, and the rescue team's equipment was showing signs of stress from the extreme conditions. We need at least 15 minutes to reach them, the rescue team reported. But these readings suggest we have less than 10 before total collapse. Maya's response was immediate. Transfer power from your suit's non-essential systems to the structural reinforcement fields. That'll buy you the time you need. That will leave them vulnerable to the environmental conditions. Telvos protested. Their core temperatures will drop to uncomfortable but survivable levels. Maya finished. We can handle it. Team 3. Execute. The aliens watched in amazement as the human rescue team deliberately compromised their own safety systems to save others. They worked through conditions that should have been debilitating, their bodies pushing through barriers that most species considered absolute limits. When the last group was finally evacuated, when all crew members, human and alien, were safely back in the station's medical bay, Telvos approached Maya with what their species would consider a radical proposal. I will be recommending to the Council that all deep space rescue protocols be revised, they said. Clearly, our understanding of what is possible needs to be updated. Maya, checking on both human and alien crew members in the medical bay, simply nodded. That's the thing about possibility, she said. It's not about what conditions you face. It's about how you choose to face them. As if to emphasize her point, the station shuddered with another ice shift. The alien crew members tensed, but the humans barely seemed to notice. They were already beginning repairs, treating the near disaster as just another problem to be solved. Telvos made one final note in their report. Perhaps what we have long considered to be impossible is merely a limitation of imagination rather than capability. The humans are teaching us that survival is not about avoiding challenges, but about rising to meet them. The Galactic Council's emergency chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from 37 spacefaring species gathered around the massive holographic display, their various environmental suits and support systems creating a low background hum. At the center of the display, a swirling mass of darkness moved through space, defying all known laws of physics. High Counselor Zexvan's crystalline form pulsed with distress patterns as they reviewed the latest data. 3 outposts gone. 2 mining colonies evacuated. The anomaly continues to grow, and our best containment efforts have failed. It's not just growing, added Science Director Caxley, their scales now a deep purple of concern. It's learning. Each attempt to stop it has only made it stronger. It adapts to every weapon, every shield frequency, every containment field we've tried. The chamber erupted in worried murmurs. Environmental suits whirred and hissed as various species expressed their distress in their own ways. The threat had emerged from deep space 2 weeks ago, and nothing in the Galactic Council's considerable technological arsenal had even slowed it down. Perhaps a new voice cut through the chaos. You're approaching this the wrong way. All eyes and sensory organs turned to Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's representative to the Council. She stood without an environmental suit in the carefully regulated chamber, her presence a reminder of human physiological resilience. "Explain," Zexvan commanded. Chen walked to the holographic display, her movements confident even in the chamber's artificially balanced gravity. "You're trying to overcome this threat with pure technology. But from what I see in these readings, this anomaly isn't just a physical phenomenon. It's an adaptive system. It doesn't just resist our efforts, it incorporates them into itself." She manipulated the display, highlighting patterns that the Council's analysts had missed. "Look here. Each time we've tried to contain it, it's not just breaking free. It's using our own containment fields to grow stronger. It's treating our attacks as resources." Fascinating analysis, Caxley admitted, their scales shifting to a thoughtful blue. "But how does this help us?" "Because humans," Chen said with a slight smile, "are very, very good at dealing with adaptive threats. We evolved on a world that constantly forced us to outthink our challenges, not just overpower them." The chamber fell silent as Chen brought up new data, Earth's historical records of humanity overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. Natural disasters, diseases, climate extremes, and more. "We don't just survive these challenges," Chen explained. "We learn from them. We adapt faster than they do. And most importantly, we understand something that I think this anomaly hasn't encountered before: the power of intentional vulnerability." Intentional vulnerability. The concept seemed to cause physical discomfort to many of the Council members. "Sometimes," Chen continued, "the best way to overcome a superior force isn't to match its strength, but to use that strength against it. We've developed entire combat systems around this principle, and I believe we can apply this thinking to our current situation." She gestured to a human who had been quietly observing from the back of the chamber. Commander James Martinez stepped forward, his decorated uniform marking him as a veteran of Earth's space forces. "We've analyzed the anomaly's behavior patterns," Martinez said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone used to facing impossible odds. "It's not just powerful, it's predictable in its adaptations. It responds to threats in consistent ways, always seeking to absorb and incorporate new energy patterns." He brought up a new simulation on the display. "We propose a joint mission, a small fleet combining Galactic Council technology with human strategic thinking. But we need to move fast. Our calculations suggest we have less than a week before the anomaly grows beyond our ability to affect it." A week. Telvo, now serving as the Council's defense coordinator, seemed to vibrate with anxiety. Even assembling a fleet that quickly would be impossible. Chen interrupted with a knowing smile. "That's our specialty." What followed was, to the amazed Council members, a masterclass in human crisis response. Within hours, Earth's various space forces had mobilized. Human engineers were already working with alien technicians, modifying Council ships with what seemed like dangerously primitive but effective improvements. "They're intentionally removing safety protocols," one alien observer noted with horror. "Bypassing containment fields, rerouting power systems, making the ships more responsive," Martinez corrected. "In combat, milliseconds matter more than safety margins. We can't outpower this thing, but we can outmaneuver it." The Council chamber had transformed into a joint command center. Humans worked alongside aliens, their different approaches to problem-solving creating solutions that neither group would have conceived alone. The humans' willingness to take calculated risks, combined with the Council's advanced technology, was producing strategies that defied conventional military doctrine. "The fleet will be ready in 3 days," Martinez reported to the Council. "We've modified the ship's systems to operate in conditions that would normally be considered unsurvivable. The alien crews are being trained in human combat techniques." "And if this plan fails?" Zexvan asked, their crystalline form reflecting the chamber's tense atmosphere. Ken's response was pure human. "Then we'll come up with another plan, and another, until we find one that works." That's what humans do. We don't accept impossible odds. We change them. As the chamber buzzed with preparation activities, Caxley approached Chen privately. When we first discovered Earth, we thought we'd found primitives struggling to survive on a death world. Now I wonder if perhaps we found exactly what the galaxy needs, a species that treats the impossible as merely a challenge to overcome. Chen watched as human and alien crews worked together, preparing for a mission that by all standard protocols should be suicidal. That's the thing about impossible situations, she said. They have a way of showing you what you're really capable of. The anomaly loomed in the holographic display, its swirling darkness a reminder of the threat they faced. But for the first time since it appeared, there was hope in the council chamber. They had something they didn't have before. The crazy, brilliant, impossible strategies of a species that had turned surviving the unsurvivable into an art form. The joint fleet hung in the void of space, 16 ships of mixed human and alien design facing the swirling darkness that had consumed so much already. From the bridge of the lead vessel Terran Dawn, Commander James Martinez watched the anomaly's patterns, seeing in its movements something that reminded him of Earth's most dangerous predators. "Final system check complete," reported Lieutenant Sarah Wong, her fingers dancing across the modified control interfaces. The ship's alien technology had been extensively rebuilt according to human specifications, sacrificing safety margins for raw performance in ways that made their alien allies deeply uncomfortable. "All ships reporting ready," added Crix, their crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy. As the fleet's alien liaison, they had watched in amazement as humans transformed careful Galactic Council protocols into something far more aggressive. Martinez nodded, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Begin Phase 1. Remember, everyone, this thing adapts to direct attacks, so we're going to give it exactly what it expects." The fleet moved into formation, their engines flaring with carefully modulated energy signatures. The anomaly responded exactly as predicted, its darkness reaching out with tendrils of void stuff that sought to absorb and incorporate their power. "It's taking the bait," Wong reported, monitoring the energy readings. Absorption patterns matching simulations. The alien crew members watched in tense silence as the humans deliberately let the anomaly get closer, violating every safety protocol in the Galactic Council's database. The darkness reached for them, hungry for their energy. "Now," Martinez commanded. The fleet split apart in a maneuver that should have been impossible, ships moving with a precision that ignored structural stress limitations. As the anomaly's tendrils tried to track them, the vessels executed a series of randomized micro-jumps, their modified engines pushing far beyond design tolerances. "Phase 2, Martinez ordered. "Show it what humans mean by controlled chaos." The fleet's formation transformed into what looked like complete disorder, but was actually a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. Ships darted in and out of the anomaly's reach, each one presenting a tempting target of energy, only to pull away at the last second, forcing the entity to constantly shift and stretch its attention. "Sir," Wong called out, "the strain on the engines is approaching critical levels. Alien ships are reporting system failures." "Hold the pattern," Martinez responded. "This thing's used to dealing with targets that retreat when threatened. Time to show it something new." Instead of pulling back, the human-modified ships pushed closer. Warning alarms screamed across every bridge as they deliberately entered zones that their sensors classified as unsurvivable. The anomaly's tendrils wrapped around several vessels, beginning their usual absorption process. "Energy drain beginning," Crix reported, their crystalline structure vibrating with stress. "We can't take much more of this." Martinez allowed himself a small smile. "We don't need to. Look at the pattern analysis." The tactical display told the story. The anomaly had grown used to easy victories, to targets that tried to resist its power directly. Now, faced with prey that seemed to ignore the very concept of self-preservation, its responses were becoming erratic. "Phase 3, Martinez commanded. "Lieutenant Wong, initiate the resonance pulse." What followed was perhaps the most audacious display of human problem-solving the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of fighting the anomaly's absorption effect, the fleet's modified engines began feeding it carefully modulated energy pulses. Each pulse was designed not to fight the darkness, but to work with it, to guide it into a self-reinforcing pattern. "Sir," Wang reported, her voice tight with concentration, "the anomaly's own energy matrix is beginning to amplify our pulse sequence, just like a feedback loop in Earth's ocean waves." The darkness began to writhe, its perfect absorption patterns disrupted by the very process it used to feed. The humans had turned its greatest strength into a weakness, using its own adaptability against it. "All ships, execute final maneuver," Martinez ordered. "Show this thing what happens when you corner a species that evolved on a death world." The fleet moved as one, their engines pushing to absolute limits as they executed a maneuver that looked like madness, but was actually precisely calculated. They drove straight into the heart of the anomaly, their modified shields creating a resonance pattern that forced the entity to try to absorb everything at once. The void screamed, or at least that's how it felt to every being watching. The anomaly's perfect darkness began to fragment as its own absorption process turned inward, forced to consume itself by the human's impossible strategy. "Clear the blast radius," Martinez commanded. The fleet pulled back just as the anomaly reached critical instability. There was a moment of impossible silence, then a burst of energy that briefly outshone nearby stars. When the sensors cleared, where the anomaly had been there was nothing but normal space, sprinkled with a fine dust of exotic particles. In the aftermath, as damage reports and status updates flew between ships, Cricks approached Martinez on the bridge. "You knew," they said. "Somehow you knew it would work." Martinez shook his head. "We didn't know. We hoped. Sometimes that's enough, if you're willing to risk everything on that hope." The fleet limped home, their ships pushed far beyond design limits, but their crews alive and victorious. In the Galactic Council chamber, the debate over the battle's implications lasted for days. "They did the impossible," one council member argued. "They turned established tactical doctrine upside down and survived conditions we considered unsurvivable." "No," corrected High Counselor Zexpan, their crystalline form glowing with new understanding. "They showed us that our definition of impossible was wrong. Their whole history prepared them for this. Every challenge their death world presented helped create a species that doesn't accept limitations, that sees adversity as an opportunity to evolve." The Council's final declaration was unanimous. Humanity would be welcomed into the galactic community not as primitive survivors of a hostile world, but as teachers. Their unique perspective, forged in conditions that should have killed them, had become exactly what the galaxy needed. Dr. Sarah Chen, standing before the council to accept their declaration, summed it up perfectly. "The very things you once pitied us for, our harsh world, our constant struggles, our need to adapt and overcome, these weren't curses, they were gifts. Evolution's gift to a species that learned to thrive on challenge and turn adversity into advantage. And now, those gifts are something we can share with the galaxy." As if to emphasize her point, reports were already coming in of alien species requesting human instructors, eager to learn the Deathworlder perspective that had turned impossible odds into victory. The galaxy was changing, and at its heart was a species that had never learned to accept the impossible, because their very existence had always defied it.